Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Hilton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people on the planet. For August, we're focusing on travel. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Caramel McCoy, founder and owner of Women Travel Abroad, a boutique travel company focusing on solo women travelers who are 35 years old or older who want to travel in style and go to dream and bucket list destinations and share the experience with people who feel like longtime girlfriends. Ms. McCoy has traveled to almost every continent on the planet and has encouraged and taken hundreds of women travelers on experiences and to places they never would have dared to try or go before. Let's get into the interview. First, let me introduce our guest, Caramel McCoy, founder and owner of Women Travel Abroad, a boutique travel company focusing on solo women travelers who are 35 plus, who want to travel in style, to dream in bucket list locations, and share the experience with people who feel like longtime girlfriends. In addition to owning a travel boutique, Ms. McCoy is a speaker, travel trainer, business developer, and the owner of Selling Through Relationships online training course. Welcome, Caramel.
Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so glad that you had time to do this interview.
I'm glad to be here. I enjoy talking to you anyway. So just to do it on the podcast makes sense to me.
Great. So before we get started, for our audience, can you let them know why you started a travel company?
Oh, wow. Okay. So 2017, we were just coming back from living abroad for 4 years in Germany. My husband is active duty Air Force. Well, he's active duty for another 9 days. He actually retires here just in a little bit. But anyway, he was deploying for a year to Qatar, and I was going to California for a year. And I thought, I don't want to go get a job. And I know how to do this travel thing. I wonder if I can get a bunch of ladies who want to travel with me. So I hosted a meetup at a Chick-fil-A, printed out a wonky one-page flyer and said, hey, y'all want to go with me to Amsterdam and to Paris? And they were like, let's go. And it took off from there.
That sounds great. You make it sound easy.
Yeah, so people have said that before, but here's the thing. When I started, I didn't know how big it could be. I'll tell you, I didn't start it because I felt like, I'm going to just, continue to take a billion trips. I had in mind that there would be travel training involved, and I also had in mind that there would also be people who were like me, wanting to host small group tours and not do the big, 50 people deep, on a big bus. Doing it with 5 or 6 ladies, no more than 8, just makes a difference. And so, yeah, I only booked the first trip, and then I thought, let me make sure I like taking ladies across the world. Maybe this might not be the thing for me, but it ended up being okay.
That's great that you found out that you liked it. Yeah, because sometimes when you like something and then you make it into a profession, it can sometimes backfire.
Yeah, you're telling me.
What is your most favorite place or your best place you've ever traveled?
Oh, wow. So that's easy. I say it on my call every week with my travelers. So since I was a young girl, all of my reports were always on this country. Every time I thought about going somewhere exotic, this was on my list. And it took me a long time to get there, but Morocco is my favorite place on earth. I feel like those are my people. I feel at peace when I'm there. And it lights up my life when I go to Morocco. So if there's any place on earth that would be it.
Okay, I've always wanted to go. Hopefully I get to go soon. I'll have to take one of your trips.
Absolutely. So, you're always welcome, Anne-Marie. I would love to have you over there with me.
Yes. It probably will be happening sooner than later, maybe in 2023 or something.
Sure.
Right now, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk about travel is because obviously we've all been locked up around the world in a pandemic, and people are literally losing it at the seams, and now they are trying to get out of their houses and go around and get out there in the world. And so one of the things that you've probably seen, I'm sure, in the news is that travel is a little bit chaotic right now.
Yeah.
And so I thought you would be the perfect person to kind of give us an overview because you own a travel company. And then also you have the perspective of, I guess I would say like a fairly new population of women travelers. Women have started traveling alone, I guess, in the last decade and a half. It has become more popular. Definitely, especially with the pandemic, and then obviously we see a lot of, I guess we could say, violence, and obviously we see some changes within different countries and the climate. And one of the things that, of course, women travelers are always concerned about traveling alone is about their safety and things like that. I guess one of the first things, since you are in the travel industry, how long would you say that the solo travel movement has been in place?
So you can, I would say probably in the last, like you said, 15 years. It really got popular in the last 10 years. And social media brought on a whole another tribe of people who would consider themselves solo travelers, right? So a solo traveler doesn't necessarily mean someone who is by themselves. It just means that they are not going with someone who they actually know. And I think people kind of misconstrue those two things, right? You know, there is the solo traveler who actually will go by themselves, not ever, not with anyone, no companion, and just kind of rough it in various countries. And then there's a solo traveler who says, I want to go, but I'm just going with people who are not my people or that I know. I'll tell you that there is, depending on who you talk to, on whether or not they like to go alone, meaning in solitude. And that also depends on the country that you're visiting. But I'll say in the last 10 years, what you're seeing is people saying, I'm tired of waiting on my best friend who doesn't have the money. I'm tired of waiting on my husband who doesn't like to travel. I'm tired of waiting on my kids to get grown. I'm tired of waiting on, me to have, $1 million in the bank. I want to go and see something different now. And I'm going to do that the best way possible through a small group like I have, through a large group that there are large women groups out there. And then also I'm going to go to a place where, as long as I feel safe, I'm going to travel there on my own.
Speaking of safety, obviously that's one of the biggest fears that people think of when they're traveling alone. I guess what are the other fears that you've encountered when you start to talk to a client?
Oh my goodness. So there are all kinds of rumors out there about various cultures as if they live entirely differently than we do in America. And I always have to tell Americans, the women who travel with me, hey, listen, everyone in the world goes to the restroom like you do. Everyone in the world has to lay down in a bed like you do or go to sleep. We all do the same things. We just made them do it. It may look a little different, right? But it's still the same. And so I have to dispel rumors like, I don't want to pee in a hole in the ground. What does that even mean? Like, where are you going that has to be? And if that's the case, then you obviously don't need to go to that place, right? Like, I've heard people say, I don't want to have to wear, the big hijab and everything all over my body and face when I go to that part of the world. Well, I'm not taking you to the back roads of Iraq where, you're right? Like, we're going to be traveling in places where it's a pretty Western type of culture. And the people who wear those type of, wear that Muslim garb, those people are doing that by choice. And so, I just kind of have to just, a lot of them, depending on the region, but I have to kind of just let them know that, what you're getting in those other countries is an authentic look and view into how they live their lives. And it's not wrong. It's just different. And so I'll say that I remember one of my favorite stories is that I had an American, we were in Germany and we were eating Spätzle. Spätzle is a German dish, right? And she says, "Oh, this doesn't taste anything like Spätzle. This is awful. American tastes different." I'm like, "Girl, Spätzle comes from Germany. You're in Germany. That stuff you're getting in America is not how Spätzle tastes, right? You're not going to get, you know what I mean? It's not watered down." So those are the kind of things that I like to dispel. And also the fact of, hey, if you feel like you're going to be unsafe in a region and it's uncomfortable for you, there are a billion other places that you can go instead of going to that place. So, I tell them if it's not your thing, just, kind of chill on that and go find some place that really is your thing, because there are plenty of places I'm sure that they could find that speak to them.
I guess so. Oh, what would you say are the benefits now of traveling solo that are, that people wouldn't assume that they're going to get?
Oh my goodness. So when you go with your or let's say this, when you go with a family member, you feel obligated. You don't feel those type of obligations when you're going solo. When you go solo, you meeting the expectations of someone else because you've done the organizing of the trip, or because they expect you to take care of them. That kind of goes out of the window, especially with a group like WTA, right? So Women Travel Abroad, WTA for short, we leave it up to the traveler to decide when to opt in and when to opt out and what that's going to look like. And I think that travel your way and not someone else's way is really trending up now. I don't want to be stuck on a tour that I think sucks. I want to, if I don't like the tour, I want to be able to say, you know what, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore, and move to the next on the itinerary, or do something completely different. And so it's kind of like if you go on a cruise where they say, dine your way, you don't have to choose the time. Well, that's kind of how we like to travel as well. I like to be a little bit more spontaneous in our itineraries so we don't feel so, confined and constricted.
That makes sense. It's it's freedom in a different way that I ever thought about it. As for a solo traveler, something I didn't think about is like every time that you are with somebody, especially family, as you mentioned, family tends to be rigid, I guess, and for most people.
Yeah.
So having this freedom to experience a culture, or maybe a trip how you would like, or get that relaxation that you probably don't when you are with sometimes family or other people.
Yeah, the other part of that too, Anne-Marie, is, when we travel with single accommodations. A lot of group travel, which is nothing wrong with doing double, when you have with someone you don't know. However, that can be somewhat daunting if you're an introvert or someone who doesn't really, who likes to be in the, with people, but I don't want to be with people in my most intimate space, right? Mm-hmm. Your bedroom and your bathroom are the most intimate spaces that you'll have. And so to share that with somebody that you don't know can be somewhat intimidating. So we took that intimidation out of the way we travel. We make it always single occupancy. The only way it's double is if you bring your own person. And that's on purpose. I just don't, and we used to do double occupancy, but and it wasn't uncomfortable. Everybody was good with it, but when it finally became single occupancy, it really changed the perspective and changed the views on how people looked at, okay, this is doable. I get to go in a great hotel. I don't have to share my space, and I can kind of decompress and feel what I've dealt with all day in this other country, and then be able to come back to the group the next morning refreshed and ready to go.
I guess speaking of refresh, what makes women travelers different than other types of travelers, mostly male, I would say, or maybe younger people?
Yeah, so I've had many people say, "Oh, Caramel, you should do couples. Oh, Caramel, you should do children, moms and daughters, or you should do." And I'm like, no, there are other people who do that. That's not my thing. So for me, I choose to travel with women because that's my comfortable space, and it's what I like to do, right? A man coming to a trip, it changes the dynamic. Men typically are problem solvers. They don't know how to usually take a back seat, and they don't know how to just kind of chillax in the moment, right? And they tend to not want to be out all the time. Give me one thing and then that's a wrap. For me, traveling with a woman makes it to where we're kind of like-minded, the same type of tribe, and it just makes it for a much easier type of trip. And then a man in a women's group, if he's a cute guy, maybe the women are, a couple of them are kind of, eyeing him, and it just makes it to be a little bit more messy than I would like when I travel, which is why I specifically made it to where I'm targeting just women. And our demographic, it makes a difference for me in the way that the trip comes together and actually flows throughout the time that we're traveling.
So what kind of precautions do you tell women to take precautions as you are planning a trip because they are going solo, even though they are going to be with a group? Do you have like a sessions or something that you give them of precautions that they should take as a solo traveler?
Absolutely. Let me tell you. So as a woman, you have to be mindful of where you're traveling to at all times and not be naive about being somewhere where you're unfamiliar, right? So to me, it's no different than someone who lives, wherever in point A and they go to the Big Apple, New York City, and they end up finding themselves somewhere in Hell's Kitchen, right? Like that's not a place you probably need to be if you don't know the surroundings. And so I often tell my travelers, be mindful about the cash that they're flashing around, be mindful about where they use their credit cards. If it's a place where it's reputable and you feel like it's, but a street vendor, we're probably not going to use our credit cards there. We're going to be mindful in how we're dressing when we're in certain parts of the world. We're going to be mindful about how we speak to people. I think Americans are spoiled in thinking that they can just tell everyone how it is, and that's really not the way the world is. And so I oftentimes have to calm them down in understanding that the culture is different. I remember having a lady, we were in Amsterdam, and she was griping about how she had to wait for her salad, and how did she get her hamburger before I got my salad? What does it take to put some lettuce in the bowl? And I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is an American thing. So I said, would you like another glass of wine? Because we got this table all night. I'd like for you just relax. That salad that you're about to get, it's going to be the best salad you've ever had in your life. I can guarantee it. But it takes a little while to get those fresh greens. I'm sure they probably came out of that garden. You see it over there? And she was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And it was the best salad that she'd ever had. It was a great yogurt dressing, and she was amazed by it. She had a glass of wine, and I was able to change a little bit of that perspective that everything has to be done immediately and on time, and customer service, right? It's just different. Mm-hmm. So I kind of try to keep those kind of thoughts in perspective when in terms of a solo traveler going anywhere out of the country for the first time.
I guess, is there an ideal person that would be great as a solo traveler, or is solo traveling for everyone?
Oh, shucks. Yeah, so it's not for everybody. I have had my best friend has never come on a trip with me, even though I'm, going to comp it, right? She's going to come with me. All she has to do is just come. And she won't, because she's not a solo traveler. And the reason why she's not is she has no desire to be in another culture. She thinks that her culture is the best culture, and she feels like, and so if you are that way, a true, what has been termed now a nationalist, someone who believes, wholeheartedly that, they're the best. And I'm not saying that we're not the best. I'm just saying that, there are some other great cultures out there. If you are not one of those folks who likes to peer into the lives of other people, then it probably isn't the best thing for you to do to travel somewhere. Now, that being said, if you're a naturist, that maybe you would go to a place where there aren't many people, but there's just nature. But even in that situation, you're going to have to figure out a way to get there. So I would tell you, if you're not adventurous and are able to laugh at yourself when things don't go the way that they need to, then solo travel is probably not the best thing for you.
Okay. That's definitely something to consider. I'm thinking of some friends of mine now that I have never taken trips for, because what you mentioned, I saw some similar characteristics in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now to turn the conversation a little bit to what's currently going on in the industry, and of course dealing with the COVID virus. How would you say that the COVID pandemic, I guess it's still going on. Obviously, in the U.S., we've been a little bit more lax now that we have a vaccine going out. But how would you say the COVID virus has changed the travel industry?
Oh my goodness, it's upside down, and so people who are leery about going on a cruise ship, the cruise industry is taking a terrible nosedive, right? The airlines have grounded, half of their fleets, and getting a flight to places, even though it might be inexpensive, the flights change all the time. I'm going to Morocco for the first trip that WTA has taken out of the country since December of 2019. And this trip to Morocco was crazy trying to get airfare. The airlines are changing the flight times. It seems like every other day. I found that we couldn't fly through Europe to get to Morocco, which is what you typically do. I had to fly directly to Morocco. So that means I had to buy a domestic flight to get to JFK in New York, and then had to take a JFK flight directly to Morocco. Otherwise, I couldn't go through Amsterdam to get a flight. I can tell you that hotels have taken a huge beating. Rates are going to be affected by that. I can tell you that countries are changing on a swivel, and insurance, travel insurance that people are used to getting with cancel for any reason insurance has changed. It's hard to get those policies, and the rates have doubled. Resorts are having to offer COVID tests upon departure because, as a foreigner, you don't know where to go get a COVID test or how to get one. So they're including those in stays at hotels and various places, or at least the good ones, right? And being able to just make that change. I can tell you some of my travelers did not to Morocco next month. They didn't get the COVID vaccine. Well, if you have the vaccine, you can come in no problem without a COVID test. But that's not the case for those who didn't. You have to have a negative COVID test within 48 hours of the results, which is a whole lot. That's not a lot of time when you're traveling from America to get to Africa, and having the results in hand. It's mind-boggling how much of that has changed. Now, there are countries that have invitations to travelers who still want to come. So I always like to dispel the rumor that nobody's traveling anymore. That's not true. There have been people still traveling through the pandemic like there was no pandemic. But they've also had to abide by all of the rules from the different countries to which they're traveling to. So if you do your research and you make sure that you stay on top of the country information for wherever your destination is, you'll be good to go. One of my favorite ones is Croatia. Croatia never closed for the pandemic. So I had, some influencer travelers who were, Instagram influencers who were bragging, showing pictures of being in Croatia. But what they didn't tell you is that they had to have a COVID test. They had to quarantine for, I think it was 72 hours to 10 days, depending on what country they came from. And it was expensive to do that, but it just so happened that they, of course, were getting it, comped by the hotel, right? So those are the kind of things I like people say, dispel the rumor that, people have still been traveling. Are you ready to abide by the rules to continue to do so?
Yes, one of the things, because right now I'm even preparing to go to a trip. Hopefully Montreal will be fine in October. One of the things that my husband and I haven't been even discussing is it going to be okay to go through air travel, I guess, and to be in the airport? I guess, how are you making people feel comfortable about getting on a plane again?
Okay, so I'll tell you this, Emery, and this is a true statement, and I say it to my travelers. I am not in the business of convincing anyone to go anywhere. So for me, I let everyone know up front, if you are super scared and you have anxiety about making a trip, then you should not make it, period. I had a traveler who was scheduled to go with me to Morocco. As it got closer, she started reading reviews and hearing all of the stuff and watching the news. And I said, listen, bow out. Do not continue to move forward, because the anxiety that comes with that, and then going on the trip and something going wrong, you'll always regret it, and that puts a sour taste in your mouth. So to me, if you feel uncomfortable, then you should not go. The other thing is, we're wearing masks in airports. You've got a couple of onesie twosies reports that you see where someone's got punched out and someone wasn't wearing their mask like they were supposed to. Well, you have unruly passengers doing unruly things all over, right? It's not just in airline. So, my advice is, if it is uncomfortable and you're feeling, I don't want to do this, then my goodness, do not go until you do feel like, it's time to go. You're spending quite a bit of money and a lot of time and energy towards going somewhere that you expect to have a good time at. And if you're already starting before you get there having a bad time, then you should stop. But I'll tell you, airports are packed these days. It is not. There are people who are traveling and they are packed, and it's happening. So, wear your mask, have your sanitizer, stay safe. As soon as you get out of the airplane and go to your hotel, get showered up and get cleaned up and move on.
What would you say is the best place for travelers that are planning to travel or already traveling to get the best information regarding the infection status of different parts of the world that they're traveling to?
Great question. So I think that going through the State Department is a great resource. A lot of times the State Department is up to date. However, you have to be country specific and region specific. So while if I go to Morocco, Marrakesh is okay to travel to, Fez may not be, right? So you want to be mindful of that. The other website would be going to the CDC, that has up-to-date information about COVID and what it's doing in various parts of the world. Not just COVID even, but also other infectious diseases that are affecting different regions of the world. The World Health Organization, or WHO, is a great resource. And then, to me, the top priority resource for any place that you're going to travel to is the tourism department of the country in which you're traveling. My goodness. That's where you're going to get your information. And typically I start, like for instance with Morocco, I started with Royal Morocco Air. And the reason why I started with them is because they're the airline flying to and from the country. So if anyone has to be up on those rules, it has to be them. And I also use the Moroccan Tourism Department. And I'm not talking about going to Lonely Planet or any of these forums that you might go on. That is absolutely not a place to get good information. What you hear there are a lot of rumors and innuendo and, oh, it's like this and my friend told me. No. Always go to a government site or well-respected airline for the country in which you're traveling to, because that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date and valid information.
So with all these changes that are happening due to COVID and the pandemic that is still raging pretty strongly in countries like India, what are the most innovative things that you've seen that the travel industry has started implementing?
Okay. So I like having the COVID vaccine and being able to get the COVID testing in the airports for your departures and arrivals. I like that they have with some countries like Belize, they call it gold standard, which means that this hotel has been vetted to make sure that they are, having the traveler's best interest in mind. And so they cling to the specific standards of what the CDC guidance would be, or their respective disease control departments would be. I know in Mexico, if you travel there, if you do get COVID while you're there, there and there's a negative test, they will allow you to stay at the resort on them while you're recovering. Now, it's going to be a different room than you stayed in when you were paying for it. It still is on the result, and they'll bring you food every day until you get a negative test and are able to fly back to America. So that's also a plus. And then the other part is being flexible. If you're traveling with me to Morocco, I've told my travelers 100%, you're going to need to be flexible. And you're also going to have to take responsibility for whatever that looks like in terms of your travel. So if you get to Amsterdam and they say that you can't get to Morocco because they literally just changed it while you were in mid-flight, that's not going to be a responsibility for anyone else. You're going to have to own that and understand this is the luck of the draw for traveling during such a, monumental time. So as long as my travelers know that, and I've made sure that I tell them that, and I tell anyone who's traveling, as long as you keep track of and understand that the onus is on you, then you'll be fine.
Well, that's a good way to get people, taking responsibility and not feeling, victimized by the situation.
Man, I will tell you this, Anne-Marie, one of the worst things, during COVID affected most travel businesses in a major way. As a matter of fact, the travel industry, 1 out of every 10 jobs is in the travel industry. And people don't realize in travel and tourism and hospitality. And, you're talking about it rippled through, right? And then the other part was you got a lot of tourism companies and businesses that went out of business, that they just couldn't stand up and keep going. My business itself took a huge hit, a $45,000 hit because of, booking hotels that went out of business or tour companies that went out of business who, just didn't make it. So that whole victim thing and what Americans feel like is real customer service is not me having to say, oh, I'm sorry for you. The COVID, it's not refundable. I've got to change my policy because something has happened to you. Now, again, I split the difference with my travelers, which was more than a lot of travel companies did, but I still got kind of slammed by people thinking that I was supposed to do what's right for them and give them all their money back when, hey, you took a risk and you knew the risk was hard. You didn't get insurance. That's going to be something that you have to deal with,
Yes. Speaking of the hits that the industry has taken, I know for one thing, there's a lot of different things, but one of the things I know that are contributing to the delay of flights is that for pilots that were not flying and staying at home with everybody else from the pandemic, that the airlines, depending on who they worked for, they would have to kind of reinstate themselves so that they would be up to par. Mm-hmm. Other things that I've heard that have hit the industry are everything from even when you're in the airport and you're waiting for your next flight, the places that you eat or don't have workers.
Yep.
Also, I remember reading an article about they couldn't even get people to take the janitorial jobs at the airport. So I know that the industry itself has been hit in a way that like it never has been before.
Shucks. So the guy who does the peanuts for the airlines, he had a warehouse full of peanuts that he couldn't even sell. So what does he do? If his whole business is solely dependent on selling to the airlines and the airlines aren't flying, what happens to that business? The guy who owns all of the parking spot places, where you park your car and then they shuttle you to the airport, he literally lost 60% of his business. He had to lay off 75% of his staff. There was nobody parking at the parking spot. So, the ramifications is far reaching, and you're talking about all the way down to, like you just said, people who are working at the, Aunt Annie's pretzels in the airport. If there's nobody there to buy them, why do I have you staffed? So yeah, it's pretty bad on all of those fronts.
Do you think, Is the industry going to recover quickly, like some things have been recovering quickly after the pandemic, or do you think this is going to be a long game?
Oh, this is a long game. Italy, one of the hardest hit countries for COVID, is still trying to figure out how they're going to get their tourism. I mean, their GDP, 30% of their GDP is tourism. Like, that's a huge amount of money that's dependent on people coming from another place. And so it's going to be a while before we're able to see, and it's going to be also a while before we'll see the full ramifications for what this actually has done to various countries around the world. And, furthermore, I feel like people need to be more patient when it comes to travel and, where they're going to go. They have to be diligent about, their expectations. And no, I think that we're gonna see lasting effects of this for quite some time. What I'm seeing right now, for instance, I don't know if you've checked on rental cars lately. It costs you usually $199 to $109 a day in small places, up to $200 a day to rent a car. People are like, how in the world is this? Well, people like Enterprise, I think, or Hertz, they had to file bankruptcy. They had so many in their fleet with nobody driving them. That was a wrap. They were cash strapped. They had to sell off a lot of their fleet. So with less supply and more demand comes, right, higher prices. So yeah, so it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I saw about the car rental shortage and how much it costs, and especially one of the big places that has been hit is Hawaii.
Yeah.
Everybody in the U.S. was trying to they're like, well, if I have to be here, I might as well be in Hawaii. But I know in Hawaii, people there are trying to say there's nobody working here anymore to help you.
Right. That's funny you should say that. I just announced a trip to Hawaii. We put one together for Christmas, right before Christmas, and that price point, I couldn't believe it. I had looked at that a couple of years ago, and I think it was going to be something like $2,800 to $3,200. That price has skyrocketed, almost double. We in order for me to take somebody there for the 6 days like we typically do, you're talking about I think it's $4,400. It's a lot. But that's how much it costs. And so my husband always says, it costs what it costs. There's nothing I can do to change that. And so how bad do you really want it? And I think that's going to be the key. The people who are going to be traveling here in the near future are going to be the ones who have the money to travel. You won't see a whole lot of the younger travelers like you once did, because things were so cheap and it was so easy. And I think that it's going to be more of the established folks who are able to continue to get outside of the country.
Yeah, it's going to be I guess the 50s when it was a luxury thing to do.
Sure, absolutely. And, that's one of the things I'm glad I chose the niche that I chose for WTA, because it was already a platform for where people who didn't mind spending the money for a little bit, a lap of luxury, right? And so to me, that's kind of why I'm able to continue to move forward and lean in and progress and kind of scale, because, my niche was already in the population who had the funds to spend anyway.
That was a smart move.
Right. I didn't know at the time. I would have never known. That was a question that I asked the ladies at the first meetup. The question I asked, I said, hey, we're going to Amsterdam and Paris. And I said, do you want to stay at the Holiday Inn or do you want to stay at the Waldorf Astoria? And all of them said, let's stay at the Waldorf, because they'd never done it before.
Yes, I agree.
And so, that question is the reason why we are more luxury leaning boutique travel than the other way, because they could have said the Holiday Inn, and I don't know what it would have been different. I don't know. Because they said that, they gave me that answer. That's why I geared it towards, all right, well, let me tell you, I love staying at the Waldorf. It was amazing.
I haven't been at the one in Amsterdam, but I do know I do know it's a nice hotel.
Sure.
So one of the other things, because there's so many problems going on these days, but one of the big things that we as a planet need to worry about next after the pandemic, or not even after the pandemic, but right now. Because it's predicted by the UN, if we don't take actions by 2030, that a lot of places might be underwater, experiencing floods. We have the climate is changing, and right now we're seeing that in Germany.
Mm-hmm. The floods.
Yes. So I guess. How have you seen climate change, I guess, affecting travel now, or is that not something that you have necessarily seen?
Most definitely. So I'll tell you this. So, my heart goes out to those folks in Rhineland-Palatinate. So, because that's where I used to live when I lived in Germany, right? And Rhineland-Pfalz is one of the states in Germany. So that's near and dear to me. I know people who have been affected by that, and I think that that's awful. And it really is a testament to what climate change can actually do, depending on where you live at, right? So you live in Southern California, the droughts. Mm-hmm. Imagine, I remember 25 years ago when I was a kid, even maybe longer. I remember when I used to be a kid going to visit my auntie who lives in California in Pomona. I remember the red flowers and how green it was. Like when I got back to Southern California, I was like, what in the heck is this place? It looks like the desert, and it didn't used to be that. It used to be the valley. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when someone is saying that they don't get it or they don't see it, well, open your eyes. I can't even imagine how you couldn't. So it's affecting our travel to Iceland. It's affecting travel to various places where the pristine, just the place is pristine as you want it to be, is being affected. So as far as travel is concerned, places like Machu Picchu, where there's going to start just ordering, and you'll have to order a way to get there. Places like the Galapagos Islands, where they're trying to keep the natural habitat, where they're going to start limiting any travel to those places, which goes back to me saying that the only people who will, typically be able to afford to go then are the ones who can afford to buy one of those spots, right? Because it's limited. So I think that, I tell my travelers all the time, hey, when we go to a place like Machu Picchu or to a place like Belize, when we're using those foreign shampoos and those foreign soaps and bringing it into an ecosystem that is not used to that, you are affecting that ecosystem, right? So those are the kind of things that I want my travelers to be mindful of. And I always, depending on which trip we're going on, I make sure that I give them that information so they can kind of think, oh, I never even thought of that, right? I never even thought that my charcoal toothpaste might affect the ecosystem when I'm traveling somewhere. My plastics and throwing them away. All of that matters. Mm-hmm. All of that matters. So yeah, I try to do my best to educate my travelers on the place that we're going.
I guess you just already covered something I was going to ask you, is that, how can people travel more responsibly? Actually, you brought up something that I haven't thought about. I'm glad that I am one of these people who had already gone organic with my beauty products and my soaps and all of that long ago. But I really wasn't, I didn't think about it from an environmental standpoint. I was just thinking of it in a selfish sense for my skin. Yeah. I didn't want to put that kind of stuff that I couldn't read on my skin.
Right.
Yes, I guess that is definitely something that all of us should take into account, is like, what are we doing when we get those little mini travel shampoos and the soap that we're using and the toothpaste. Yeah, you've just enlightened me. I never even thought about that.
Oh, it matters 100%. Imagine the people who are going to those rainforests and they're thinking it's harmless, right? It's just shampoo. Well, imagine that place that's never been introduced there. How do you know how that's going to affect any of those chemicals are going to affect the ecosystem there? I mean, all of that is part of being mindful about your role in the world. Like, and I get it. It's everyone doesn't think about those things, but me as the person who is educating the people and who are doing it and is organizing this travel, I feel like it's our duty as that travel agent, and I'm not a travel agent, but host or concierge or whatever you want to call yourself. If you have anything to do with the travel industry, you absolutely have to engage your traveler and to educate them about what's happening.
Yeah. So, because, everybody's always thinking about like, don't fly on a plane because of the carbon footprint. But these little things that we're doing with our plastics and everything make a much more, a bigger difference than we think, because, our plastics end up in the ocean, the water, in the landfills and all this stuff.
Yep. This is true.
I guess one of the things, these are things to help people. So how far in advance should people plan their trips these days?
Oh my goodness. So look, I just announced a trip to Hawaii that's happening in December. I just announced it, I think, 2 weeks ago. So what is this? This is July, August, September, October, November, December. So that's 5 months. Typically, that's about the time that my trips sell out, is about 5 or 6 months before the trip. But I usually try to have them available a year out in advance. These days, my goodness, I just tell people to book it still in advance 6 months, but be prepared for the changes to happen. That's what I'm telling everybody, and kind of go with the flow, right? That's what I'm saying. If you are able to be a spontaneous traveler, that's even better. I thought about getting into that kind of niche. Like, wonder if I said, hey, let's go to Niagara Falls, even though Canada's not open right now. But I'm just saying, if it were, right? Oh, I wonder if we just go to Belize, in 2 weeks. I just have to be mindful that everyone can't jump up that way. And so I still feel like, 5 to 6 months is a good time.
Okay, great. What would you say are your 3 top predictions for travel in 2022?
Okay. So it's going to be more expensive in 2022. You're going to have to be mindful that customer service and or services that are available are going to be limited in the places that you're visiting. And number 3, shucks, Anne-Marie, I'm sitting here trying to think. You won't be welcome in all places around the world like you once were. So I believe that wholeheartedly. I have not, you don't hear about people saying they're going to Asia, because Asia's like, we don't want you. It's not a bad thing. We don't want you. You need to wait. We're still not out of this. We don't know. You guys are, a little bit more irresponsible than we are. So no, stay where you're at.
This is true, as we were the leaders of the virus.
Right. So it's kind of like, we're going to have to realize that, we are not the center of the earth. And likewise, those other countries, whether they reciprocate that or not, we're just not going to be welcome everywhere like we once were. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Wow. I guess this kind of leads into my final question. What would you say is the biggest lesson that we should have all learned after this 2020 experience?
So I've learned quite a few lessons, right? I've gone through quite a bit. I've gone through ups and downs and twists and turns. But I would say that if I had to narrow it down, what is the biggest lesson? It is that that the world is fragile, and the people in it have to be mindful of their role in terms of everyone around them. And I think that not enough people worry about their role in any situation. They're always talking about what somebody else is doing. And I feel like we should own our role, right? And we should own the fact that, hey, we have been irresponsible. I did not want to wear my mask, so I'm going to be responsible for that. The fact that I might have done something that's irresponsible, or I have worn my mask and now something happens and I still get it, and now I'm wondering, why was I even doing this in the first place? If we all thought of our role in this, I think we would probably have gotten through this a little bit quicker, and with a little less, I don't know, evilness. I guess that sounds kind of harsh, but I really feel like there has been some evil talk in the world since the pandemic, and it's only because of the ignorance that we have about our what our stake is in this whole big world we have.
Yes, I couldn't. You said it better than I could ever have imagined. Yeah, no, evil. I think evil is the right word. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for your insight. I definitely learned a lot, and now I will definitely think a little bit more about what I pack, and when I go to other countries and places that are more pristine. So thank you once again.
Oh my goodness, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it. This was good conversation. I can't wait to hear it back.
Yes, I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. All right. So thank you, Caramel, for your time and insight. If you would like to learn more about Caramel or book a trip for 2022, go to womentravelabroad.com. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or simply want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.work to start your project of change today. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good, where we are focused on what matters.